Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Rangers, the weekly podcast. I'm here joined with my partner, John Dover. Michelle Miners is on leave tonight. Uh, she's not available for us, but she'll be joining us next week. This evening, we're going to have a special guest, Art Hardy, who is a Navajo or Dene medicine man. He'll be joining us, and we'll be delving into some very interesting topics. And so, with that, welcome, Art Hardy.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Art.
Always
Yeah,
good to see you, Art.
It's
it's
been
been
a
a
while.
while since, yeah, it has been, especially for you, Stan. I haven't seen you in a couple years at least.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, I
Good.
guess both of us stay busy, in our lives. So,
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Yeah, we had to go back up on Satan Butte and look for Stan and then drag him off there.
that,
left me
that is a good
behind.
location. I wouldn't doubt you get lost up there.
I I think that's possible. That's a pretty big area. I remember one of the investigations that John and I did. Uh, we traveled that top of that whole mesa by foot, and so it's a pretty big area. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. So with that, I with Michelle being gone, I think John and I are open to maybe hearing what's going on in your world today, and we can kind of give you some of what we're doing and what we've done recently, and to get things started.
Sure. Sure, that sounds like fun.
Okay. Art, could you give us a little bit of your background, just for people that haven't watched the earlier shows?
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody. As they mentioned, my name is Art. It's on the screen, Art Hardy. I'm a Navajo Nation um, medicine man, and I do come from the Navajo Nation, obviously. And I've been on a TV show. This is how I got introduced to Jon and Stan. A few years ago, we were on a TV show together, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, and we kind of just hit it off from there. And so, I've been a practicing medicine man or practitioner, healing practitioner for quite a few years. And so, through that experience, I was able to meet up with you gentlemen and kind of just we've just been going at it ever since. Every so often we tend to cross paths and we share stories, and I think I ran into Jon quite a few times already. I don't hang out much in Gallup, Stan, so I'm sorry. I don't get to see you that often.
Oh yeah. Well, anytime you're passing through, we can grab a cup of coffee and visit or
Sure.
whatever when you're around here. So yeah, you mentioned the work on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, and I know for me, uh, with those series, that there was some really interesting cases that involved paranormal phenomenon. Hence the title of this show, Paranormal Rangers. And I think that running theme with this podcast and with the show, um, you know, we have witnessed some really amazing things that fall under that umbrella of paranormal.
Right.
Excuse me. And I know with John and I, this is something that we live with. I mean, uh, the thing with the apports of coins, John even recently had an experience before we left to Toronto, Canada. And so the idea of paranormal and supernatural is something that is there, and we have a clear understanding of these phenomena. It's there with us every single day. I know it's hard for a lot of non-natives to grasp this concept and idea and uh, I guess belief system
Right.
that these phenomena are a part of our world, part of our universe, and a part of our life. And but we continue to experience these things all the time. So I don't know if you guys want to jump in with talking about some of these things.
Well,
Well,
I could, if you
I
don't
was
mind,
going to
John.
tell. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to tell him about what happened just before our trip. This is the night before. And if you've been through TSA checkpoints at the airport, you know that you have to strip out everything out of your bags and luggage and stuff and start all over.
Literally,
Yeah,
stripped out.
literally. You don't want any knife in there or bladed, like fingernail clippers or anything in there that they could open your bag up and say, okay, we're going to do a secondary search. So I took my backpack and I basically sterilized it, went through every single pocket, cleaned out everything, and then I packed just what I needed in there. We get to Phoenix, and that evening, the night before, we're going to have to be at the airport at like 4 in the morning or leave at 4. And I open up one of the pockets, and out tumbles out a coin. That coin was a Canadian $1 coin. So I said, "Whoa, what's that? What's this? Is this foretelling that we're going to Canada and it's giving me the money for a parking meter or something?" And as we got on the plane, we got over there. I'm unpacking some stuff. I have that coin set aside, and another coin appeared in my backpack, another Canadian dollar. So I've still got those. I think I'm just going to put them in a little picture frame and hang them up on my wall. But just, how the heck does it get in there? Why is it appearing? And I didn't have any Canadian money. So I guess maybe it's trying to get me started. No idea. We just kind of take it for granted now and just say, oh, well, there it is again. So that's what happened. I'm sorry, Art. I walked all over you there. So go ahead.
No, you're fine, John. You're fine. So I was just going to talk a little bit about the Mesa. And since you gentlemen haven't been back there in a couple years, back to the Satan's Butte, there's been some action going on out there where I live at with a lot of paranormal activity. I don't know. I think I might have mentioned that I go night hunting every so often. Um,
Yeah.
I might have mentioned that the time you stopped by my house, John. So, lately we've been seeing a lot of UFOs in the Greasewood area. And so they're little orbs that have been they just come out of nowhere. And as they come out, they break off into pieces and they make all these crazy shapes. And then they tend to hang around and then they kind of disappear and then they'll come back and then they kind of like move around the sky. And it's been pretty interesting the last year. I've been seeing that a lot, practically every night. It seems like every time I go out anyway, and that's usually anywhere from 2 to maybe 3 times a week. And it's been pretty active. And so I was just wondering, we don't really talk too much about politics, and I don't want to get into it too much, but with the way the world has been changing and things that have been happening within our country and around the world, especially with the possibility of war, the brink of war. It seems to me like some of the paranormal activity that's happening, it's gotten really active as the world has kind of changed and gotten more, I guess, negative in a way, and that's what I've been noticing lately. And I don't know if you guys seen anything like that recently or have experienced anything like that, but in my area, it seems to really be active now.
One of the women that I talked to on the phone, she was really concerned because she had some weird stuff happen to her. And she heard footsteps running, a weird sound, uh, kind of like the cross between a deer barking and a squirrel chirping. And she said it ran right near her, but she couldn't see it. And it ran by and up into the brush, into the trees. And she didn't know what it was. And what we've been able to kind of suss out from that is that we're thinking it's more UFO related stuff. Although she didn't see a ship, but she has seen one in the past. So, what I told her and what I tell a lot of people and what I tell people on the podcast here is that when you show fear, it allows those things to manifest even more. And so that's why one of the things we don't do is we don't react with fear. We note it. We might initially be surprised, but we don't sit there and go, "Oh no, we should run." So I'm wondering if all the fear in the world of war and everything else that's happening is causing a lot of this to manifest even more now. Just a thought.
I think that with what's going on in the world, in our lifetimes, there are the experiences like what we're seeing in the Middle East. But if you look on the grand scale of things, you look at the conflicts that have gone on in the Middle East throughout history, throughout man's history. And these things go in cycles. Sometimes, like what's going on in this country right now, you get this conflict between two opposing opinions on subject. So both of those will be pushing back and forth and conflicting. And it'll get to the point where, like what we've seen recently, where there was a fatal shooting based on political views. So when this happens, I think a lot of it is like if you went into an old abandoned house that's been sitting there for several decades with nobody living in it, and maybe you've got sheets over the chairs and over the piano or whatever might be in the room, and it's full of this dust. And if you went in there and started shaking things, and the dust would be aerating, and I view the world, the earth, like that, in that when you have like what's going on in this country right now and in the world, it's shaking and stirring up those different energies, the positive energy, the negative energy, and sometimes even what would be considered a neutral energy. And so we end up seeing all of the turmoil that comes from that. But it's really nothing new. It's new to us in our lifetime. But you look at throughout history, the time in and around Cuba and John F. Kennedy and being on the brink of nuclear war and supposedly and things of that nature. But we just go through cycles, and things will eventually calm down, and people will settle down and focus on really on what's important. And I think that's what it is. We all need to step back from the CNN news and other medias and clear our minds and meditate and focus on what's important, during these times.
Yeah.
So, John, you have some thoughts on that?
Oh, it's just, I was just going to mention that Virax, we're sorry that we didn't get to meet you when we were in Toronto. There was very limited advertisement about our being there. It was at the Native American Center in Toronto, where we had a presentation along with a lot of other people that were there about Bigfoot. And so, like I said, it wasn't heavily advertised, and they're going to change that this next year and advertise quite a bit. So we're being invited back next year. This year we ended up camping, and believe me, I understand about the Canadian Air Force now that if you're not careful, those mosquitoes will grab you and drag you off into the trees. So yeah, they were really aggressive. I think I left a half pint of blood in Canada, but yeah, what a country over there,
I have a
beautiful and
mosquito
green.
blessing way now, John.
Yeah, we're gonna need to have one.
That's funny.
So, in your life, Art, um, do you experience and have that uh, connection in the supernatural realm and world on a daily basis, or how does that work for you as a Navajo medicine man?
Every day,
Yeah,
every day there is something supernatural, spiritual. There's a lot of stuff that is happening, and it's not necessarily out in the dark at night. It's typically with the human body, the human being. I don't think we've really talked about this in the past on the past podcast, but as a human, being made of energy, you do attract energy, and some of that energy clings onto you, and it sticks to your outer torus, as it's called, right? And so as you walked around, you attract this energy, and the negative stuff really sticks to you. And so, being who I am, I can feel that on people at times, and it gets me sick, or I get dizzy, or I might feel faint, or things like that that happen, and it's only because of the gift that I have. And
yeah,
um and I feel like I need to tell these folks, like, you're really sick. You actually need to get something done for yourself that's traditional or ceremonial. And we're not talking about Western medicine. That's not going to fix anything. So, well, anyway, Western medicine, they just give you a bunch of pills now, so that doesn't really help. And what I'm talking about is in the spiritual sense of energy. And even in a room, when I walk into certain buildings, or a different room that might have history behind it, I do have those experiences where I can't be in there for too long. I start to feel anxiety. I start to feel I don't know how to explain it. I guess anxiety is about the best way to describe it, but it has a real uncomfortable feeling to it. And as I move around the room, there are certain areas in the room where it gets stronger. And so having that type of effect on me, I constantly have to either leave the room, or get my medicine bag, which I usually have with me anyway, and just to keep all that away from me, basically, is what it is. But I do run into it constantly. And can you imagine me walking up to some stranger saying, "Hey, this is what's going on with you," and then I'm not trying to be a weirdo, but telepathically or empathically, this is what I feel, and da 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 da. So I can't do that. It doesn't seem appropriate. But what I do is I just kind of get away from the person. Like, I gotta stand far away from these individuals. Uh,
Two sheep.
but pretty much, I mean, it is what it is. And for the non-believers out there, or the non-natives that may have never experienced something like that, it is real. It is real in a sense that when you're gifted like that, it does have an effect on me emotionally, psychologically. Um, and I haven't really been able to figure out a way to address that with people I encounter, or within the different rooms or locations that I encounter. Typically, I just kind of remove myself out of the situation, but as far as going up to someone saying, this is bothering you and this is what you should have done. I don't even try that. It's just, it would be too spooky for people, I think, and it would come off as weird, especially in this day and age.
With John and I, we in the past when we first started going to some of these UFO uh, conferences and seminars and stuff, there would usually be a section where they have people that read people's auras, or they'll be selling different items for things like protection and stuff like that. And John and I would always be approached by individuals telling us that, "Oh my God, you two, your auras are blinding. They're white and they're so bright that uh, they're blinding." And initially, John and I were really skeptical in that, but over the years, there'd be different people we'd be talking to that have certain abilities to work with a person's aura or their chi or energies, and they would be telling us the same thing, and it got to be where we were fairly accepting of that, and to the point where we learned to be able to try to see those auras, that people have. And I think having that uh, and being sensitive to certain energies, just like I'm like you, I can go into a room and I can sense, the energy that's there. If it's something that's benign or something that's malignant, or that you need to really be cautious of, I pick up on those things, and I know John does too, to a certain extent. Our friend Michelle is really, really sensitive to those energies. Um, John and I have a good friend. I won't mention his name here, but he he's Navajo, and he's worked for the Navajo Nation and BIA for years. And one time he was traveling away from home for a seminar, and he checked in a hotel room, and nice modern hotel room, and he brushes his teeth, gets ready for bed, and he gets into bed and nice and quiet, and then all of a sudden something off of the dresser falls on the floor. So he gets up and he picks up his bag that was on the floor, puts it back, and about 5 minutes later, same thing, the bag falls on the floor. And he ends up utilizing, his lightning struck tree medicine, and that resolved the issue that night, after he used that. But sometimes we have to, as indigenous peoples, we have to resort to using things like that to help us get through those times when we're faced with the unknown.
Yeah. And it's one thing I've always mentioned, I think on the show, I've said it a couple times already, is how did our people know to use those certain medicines, those herbs? How do they know? How did they come up with what we call ceremonies, in a sense, and the identification that it takes to understand what kind of ceremony you might need, or what might be bothering you exactly, and then how to purify or neutralize those issues that you're having. And I always find myself thinking about that when I'm doing ceremonies myself, as to how did we as Navajo people come up with this, and where did this information come from? Imagine, evolution, and people who, in the older, I don't know, maybe in Cro-Magnon days, or Cro-Magnon days, they what did they have? They didn't really have anything. They were just surviving. And then you come through the years to more modern man, and somehow, some way, this third eye that we all have, it was underdeveloped, so to speak. And as we evolve through time, the evolution, we end up starting to use this third eye. And that vision starts to become clear, and we start to have clarity with it. We start to have clairvoyance, telepathy, empathy. We start to use it in various ways. And so through this third eye, as it starts to awaken, these ceremonies start to come out, and we start to develop ceremonies based around what we can understand through that third eye, and what we're seeing and what we're experiencing. And to me, it's always been fascinating to go down that road and to really try to understand what a person might have seen or experienced, generations ago, that gave them that opportunity to create such a ceremony, a prayer, or coming up with a certain name for something, a deity of some kind, and then have that information passed on generation to generation. And so through that, by word of mouth, nothing's really written down, but by word of mouth from family to family, I guess there might have been some pretty powerful beings at some point within the Navajo community to really create these ceremonies and to create the prayers that we carry today. Although they say we're losing it, I don't think we're losing it. I think it's evolving, and I think it continues to evolve. The language that we speak may continue to evolve, but I think that it doesn't really have a impact, because what you're doing is you're projecting with your mind, you speak with your mind, and the way that your words may come out of your mouth, it still creates a vision within the opposite person, or the person that's listening to you. As that person's having those images cross their mind, that communication is still happening, it's still effective. So regardless of the kind of language you're speaking, it could be speaking, a foreign language right now, and as long as you understand what I'm saying, I am conveying that information to you. And because you're such an intelligent human being, you will get that information and you will store it correctly. So it boggles my mind sometimes when I start to think about things like that, and just how far it really can go, how deep that rabbit hole can go, once you start to really think about it and analyze it. Maybe even reverse engineering some of the prayers that I've heard of, or I've seen, or I've even done myself, as to how that is possible. Where did that power come from, and how do we continue to harness it? Is there a way to make it more powerful than it already is? Those are some of the things that I question as a medicine man.
With John and I, we were close friends with a man named Clifford Mahudi, who was a Zuni elder, and he was a very spiritual man. Some even say that he too was a medicine man for his people, the Zuni tribe. Very, very knowledgeable, and over the years, many meetings and talks with him, imparting this idea that of what we often hear with Western society referring to star people, or these beings that come from other planets, or celestial bodies coming to Earth and imparting knowledge and information. And I really follow that concept and that idea, that I think, if you go out into Canyon de Chelly and places, and you walk among some of those areas with the petroglyphs and pictographs, you see depictions of and images of things that from our past, humanity's past, and I think with that, there has been numerous civilizations from other galaxies and other maybe within other dimensions coming to and from Earth for who knows, millennia, maybe long before man has ever walked this planet. We may have had visitors here to this planet, and I think that I think there's something to that. I think there's something to that, and I think at times they teach us these things, like what you're talking with the ceremonies and the herbs and things of that nature. I mean, today you can look at the pyramids in Giza, and modern man still don't know definitively how those pyramids were constructed. I mean, there's blocks of uh, stone that have been quarried from miles and miles and miles away from those locations, and we still don't know how that occurred and how those blocks were moved. Was there an outside uh, uh, assistance with those kind of things, a knowledge, a technology in those kind of things? We don't know. So
And I don't think it was a Job Corps project, you know, to provide jobs for the citizenry. Um, a lot of that was just brutal work. They're archaeologically they're finding human remains today that have compressed spines and damaged joints and stuff like that, of just a lifetime of super hard work. And you know, we complain when we have to go out and rake the ground a little bit around the house, and you know, that's hard work for us, you know, being out in the sun for a half hour. And um, and yet those guys were out there, you know, for their whole lives doing this stuff. So
Yeah. Well, we're definitely capable of great things, and I don't think we explore, the inner part of who we are very often. Um, and I think we just rely on the system that exists and how the system exists, and we just play with that same system. We're so formatted into the way society is formulated now that we don't necessarily think outside that box too often, and we don't question a lot of things in our lives. And the only way I think you really can get that profound spiritual information is to question the reality that you live in. There's no other way. If you do not question the reality you live in, you're stuck. You're part of that system, and so to become a higher intelligence, or a being that exceeds beyond the seventh chakra, you would probably need to seriously meditate, and meditate for quite a while before you actually come up with some really solid answers that would explain things. And help you elevate yourself beyond the restrictions of maybe even the third dimension. Because I think we're capable of such things as human beings. Science can only prove so much. Beyond that, there's just, as Stan said, there's a lot unknown. How did humans create such structures? And where did the engineering come from to be so pinpoint and precise, as to how those things were constructed? And so I think we forgot how to live with this earth honestly, and the energy, and the universe, so to speak. And so we're so caught up in making money or having some type of revenue that we forget that we were probably spiritual beings long before we were consumers. And I think if we went back in that direction, and went more into a spiritual lifestyle than a consumer lifestyle, you would find a lot of answers there. Then they could probably extend your life even further out. Because from what I've heard, through the years, the way that people extend their lives out is they just don't bother with the way the society is created. They live outside of it, and they're perfectly fine. They live to be hundreds of years old. There was a story that I read a while back, or I think I might have seen it on the internet, where the guy was like 130 years old, and his mind was fine. There was nothing wrong with his mind. And they asked him how did you live so long? And he just says, I don't really care what goes on out there. And so maybe that's our problem. We worry about everything, and that's what, shortens the life of a human being. But what I'm trying to say is just that a spiritual life is probably more fruitful than a consumer life at this point.
I agree.
yeah,
Today, mankind is so focused on materialism and like you said, wealth and greed and trying to outdo the Joneses, and that we've lost touch with really our heart and who we are as a human being. You know, we're so we only allow our five senses to uh, help us make the decisions that we have in our life. We don't trust that inner sixth sense, and we don't trust our uh, our heart in knowing what is right and what is wrong, and that's very prevalent today. And so hopefully mankind can reverse that and get back to a time when we focus on family and love and helping our neighbors and really what's important in the world, not the material things that we gather or have.
Yeah, man is a spiritual being. All of man is. The trouble is that we've lost a lot of that. And when you look at modern day religion and you study uh, religious studies all over the world, there's man has a need. There's something inside him that just reaches out and wants to become part of a religion because that spiritual need is not being met at home. So you go out and you go to this church and you go to that church, or even this cult or that cult or this gang or that gang, and you're searching for something that's going to satisfy that need for your spirit. And a lot of times it doesn't work. We go to churches and then we get burned out on them. We see the politics, um, and I always like to say that they created the perfect place. They just couldn't find any perfect people to put in it. And that's kind of our dilemma, is that we are not perfect, but we strive. And so the search goes on. And so, we get people out there that are just trying everything they can without ever finding anything, and they get intensely frustrated. And they keep looking. So for us, that that spirituality has always been there. The government tried to take us to boarding schools. They tried to beat it out of us. Our grandparents, our parents, and it's that's just it. They couldn't suppress it. It still exists, and they can't destroy that. So we're survivors, and we continue on with those traditions that came before us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that where we are, in this time, I have this gut feeling we are on the edge of this universal awakening. I mean, if you look at the recent information in all of the UFO genre, you know, all of the information that's come forward by, military pilots, airline pilots, uh, professionals that are coming forward uh, in seeing things that are otherworldly, things that weren't originally from Earth, that are visiting here, and things of that nature. I think we're standing at the edge of this precipice that where there will be an awakening of and an understanding that there's much more than like what I mentioned with the materialism and focus on greed and money. And you know we know that when we leave this realm or this world, this physical world we're in, you can't take any of that wealth with you. You can't take money or material things with you. You only take your experiences and your knowledge that you've gained while living in this realm, and so
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. I always find myself in deep thought over, maybe I overcomplicate it, but as a medicine man, you have to consider all possibilities when it comes to healing. Every human being, obviously, is going to have some type of trauma. And that trauma, it can come from anywhere. It could be as simple as running a stoplight and you freaked out over it and it has created PTSD of some kind. And
yeah,
we just never know, really. It could be the smallest thing. It could be the biggest thing where you've been to war and you've seen things that or you shouldn't be seen as a human being, or you weren't raised in that environment to understand it that way. So that creates trauma as well. But I always get really deep into thought about these things, and as a healer, um, I kind of have to start off investigating and asking a lot of questions because I don't know where you've been. I don't know who you are as a person. And if there is truly something wrong with you that's spiritually wrong with you, um, I try to pinpoint that early on. And so part of the healing process is you as a human being having the ability to identify what might be the issue with yourself. That's number one. And I've mentioned that before on previous podcasts, is you have the power of God because your voice manifests through what we hear, and our mind is so powerful that it manifests that healing in some way, maybe partial, maybe not completely, but it's overcoming the challenge of you. You're the biggest challenge in your life. You're going to be the biggest challenge of your life. And I don't think people really take that into account and are irresponsible with their actions because of it. And if you understand what I'm talking about, it could be addiction is probably the biggest one. People can't get around addiction and not realizing that, it's a simple mindset, maybe. They cannot get around some of the things that have traumatized them. If that thought becomes here on your forehead, that's going to be the thing that's always going to be bothering you, no matter what you do. Even if you're trying to watch TV or something, you're never going to get that full clarity or the focus that you need to finish that episode because that thought is still right here in the forefront of your mind. And as a healer, you come along and you have to ask those questions and find out if they're actually focused on something that is, promoting ill health and other issues of that nature. And that, I think that's kind of why I brought this up, was because that's been on my mind lately. Is a lot of people have been experiencing that. I think more now they're coming forward with vertigo, and also dizziness, a lot of fainting. It seems like that's what really has been coming out lately with a lot of the prayers I've been doing. So I'm wondering what is creating that issue, and why now all of a sudden, that seems to be the thing that is affecting a lot of humans. And maybe that's related to other things out there in the world, the politics. Maybe it's the where we live at. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, was there's a lot of UFO activity in our area now. And maybe it's a combination of, well, the radiation from those spacecraft affecting the people, and they don't even know it. Things like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm going too far with it, but you cannot help but wonder what is creating these issues, and you try to find a plausible solution, is what I'm trying to get to.
I think one of the key words that you just brought up, Art, is this idea of manifesting. And Jon and I have addressed this numerous times on these podcasts, is manifestation and intent. And, I think Jon and I have seen situations where we'll have individuals that'll actually be manifesting even some serious negative energies uh, in their life, and to the point that it's actually causing the manifestation of entities that uh, more or less opening a doorway or a gateway for these energies to end up attacking them and things of that nature. And so I think it goes both ways. I think you can, I think a human being is capable of manifesting uh, angelic energies, so to speak, those guardians and protectors that we have to watch over us, watch over our families. But at the same time, I think in some situations that we end up manifesting and through intent creating an opening or doorway to allow these things in our lives. So.
Yeah, Skywatcher just made mention about a particular subject, and I wanted to bring it up. When you're an empath and you can feel other people's emotions, I know that I'm an empath in that way because if I go to a crowded place like Disneyland, it's just always my go-to uh, description because that place is crowded on a busy night. I've been there when they literally shut the gates and wouldn't let anyone else in because the park was too packed. And when you go in there and it's just like a beehive. There's so many people around you, and it's physically draining. And after a while, you get a headache. You're depressed. You're listless. And I found out that if I take a pair of foam earplugs and stick them into my ear, it really helps with all that noise and all that emotion around you to kind of keep it at bay. Uh, but the question or the statement was, what about psychic vampires? These are people that you run into maybe in the workplace that come to you and, oh, they have a story to tell. They'll tell you, I've got this problem, I've got that problem, my girlfriend left me, my mistress is demanding more time, just all these things, just one after the next. And they unload on you. And then you go away and you're carrying all that psychic burden from that person. And they're merrily skipping off, tra la 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 la, and not a care in the world. And they just left a whole, big suitcase on your back to carry their load for them. Um, what can you do, because obviously we don't want to turn around and say, you know, uh, get thee behind me, Satan, we don't want to say anything like that, and offend people. How do you take care of a situation like that in our real life?
Yeah, I think the if that's the situation you find yourself in, really just sometimes like I find myself in those positions in my political position that I occupy right now. And where in politics it's very heavy at times. There's a lot of negativity. There's not the, because you're trying to solve problems that are going to save, literally thousands of lives, maybe thousands of people, and you're representing a huge constituent population, and that comes with a lot of weight. So, in what you're talking about, at times, I do feel like running from some of these individuals because it's like I don't want to listen to all that negativity. I'm a guy who's a half full glass guy. The positive side of life, as opposed to just putting everything down and standing firm on rules and regulations. There's ways to get around things in life, and just having that type of attitude, I think, is part of the I think that's the answer to the solution, or the solution to what you're talking about, John.
I
Is just
think
keeping that positive mindset.
I
Sorry,
think
Stanley, go ahead.
sometimes in life that we have to actually distance ourselves from those toxic personalities. I have relatives of mine that live for drama. it's just an ongoing thing in their lives, and they
It's a
can't live
sport.
without. Yeah, it's their entertainment. It really is, and I can't be around that. It just, like you, John, it just drains me, and I have to distance myself from those individuals. I may care about those individuals, I may love those individuals, but because how they choose to live within that cauldron of negative energy just constantly swirling, I can't do it. I've got word that we have a couple of minutes left, so if either of you would like to make some kind of final comments regarding all of this uh, subject matter, then please do.
Or mental health is always important, and as a practitioner, mental health seems to be something that modern medicine can't really fix. So traditionally speaking, we find a lot of different solutions for that, in the ways that dealing with anxiety is probably the bigger one now, and having that ability for them to admit certain things that they may not be ready to admit, or having the ability to see, with that third eye as to what their issue may be, and having that, bring it out of them basically, and have them see it with their own eyes or feel it as they may have not have felt it before. That's the realization that some people need in order to heal. And so, in regards to what we've been talking about for about the past hour, that's where I would start, is really start to focus on some of the issues that you are scared to, you don't want to go down that street. Well, go down that street, because even though it may be scary, the outcome on the other side is definitely going to be a positive one. You have to learn how to release all that negativity and prevent yourself from getting into more negativity. And it is a work in progress from day to day. So, pray often, cleanse yourself often, and I think that all things will be okay eventually. So don't lose faith and don't lose hope. If anyone out there is struggling with mental health, please reach out to someone, and take that time to really express yourself, with someone that you trust.
I
Thanks
just want
for
to say
having.
thank you to
Yeah, thanks
everybody.
for being on with us, and thank you for everybody that tuned in.
Thank you, Art.